Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going through all of the books I read in April. So this was supposed to go up last week, but then I simply forgot that to put a video up you have to film it. So yeah. So April was actually a pretty good reading month for me, and I finally, if you've been watching along the wrap-ups this far, you will know I've had 0 5-star books, and it was really starting to get to me because I was reading a load of 4 stars, which is great, but I just wanted something to like love and squeal and all of that, and I finally got a 5-star. Not only did I get a 5-star, I got 3 5 stars. One was a reread, but 3 5 stars. So in April I read 3,821 pages across 8 books. And I listened to 66 hours of audiobooks, though I do listen on 2 or 3 times speed. All 8 of the books that I read this month were all fantasy, though I had 4 adult books and 4 YA books. 2 books I read were on audiobook, 4 books I read physically, and then the other 2 books were a mix of the audiobook and the ebook, or the audiobook and the physical book. So for star ratings, I had 2 3 stars, 3 4 stars, and 3 5 stars. My average came out as a 4.125. rating. So yeah, so that means April was my best reading month of the year so far, page-wise and also rating-wise. So the first book I read this month was The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So I did love it. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't quite that 5-star for me. But I can 100% see why this is like taking BookTube by storm and people just absolutely have fallen in love with it, because it is just so adorable and so heartfelt and so sweet. So this story, it follows a very by-the-book guy called Linus. I can never remember, is it Linus or Lionel, but I'm pretty sure it's Linus. He works for the department in charge of magical youth, and so he goes out and inspects these orphanages that hold these magical children, and he kind of has to write a report, say whether it's all good or not. And so he goes off to this house in the Cerulean Sea, and he meets some of the most dangerous magical children, and also the guy in charge of the orphanage, and it's just a really cute story. So I use CAWPILE to rate my books, so I'll just like go through them really quickly. Characters, I gave a 10. Atmosphere, I gave a 9. Writing, I gave an 8. Plot, I gave an 8. Intrigue, I gave an 8. Logic, I gave an 8. Enjoyment, I gave a 9. So it was a pretty high 4-star, but there was just like a couple of things that I wasn't completely in love with. This is a very character-focused story, and it is absolutely beautiful, and you will fall in love with these characters. I think it's impossible not to. But I mean, there definitely is a plot, but it really isn't the focus of the story. It is just more about him bonding with these children. So that is my first book that I read in April. The second book I read in April, and my first 5-star of the year, was The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. I read this because of Maya Reads. She said in her Discord, does anyone want to buddy read it? And I went off TBR because I was like, this has been like on my Goodreads TBR for like years. And so I was like, hey, yeah. And I'm so glad I did that, because I ended up really loving this story. In this story, this world has magic. And in New York, there is this thing called the Brink that stops magic people from leaving. And Esta has grown up in New York her whole life. And Esta has the power to manipulate time. And her mentor, father figure kind of person, sends her on this mission to go back to like 1902, is it 1902? And to get this magical book before someone else can. And it's just the story of her traveling back and trying to scheme with all of these people to, number one, get the book, and then to also then steal it for herself. I really did fall in love with this book. I did see a lot of people on the Goodreads comparing it to Six of Crows, and like, I can see it maybe, but also not really. Like, yeah, it's a high story. Lee Bardugo didn't invent them. I can definitely see similarities because, you know, it is like just like this ragtag bunch of people, you know, banding together, but like that happens a lot. And I would say I love both of those stories. I love Six of Crows, and I also love The Last Magician. They're both 5 stars to me. I would say Six of Crows is more character driven, whereas I think The Last Magician is better plotted. I know a lot of people don't mind it, but then I know that there is some people that that's like their biggest like problem with Six of Crows, is the fact that you don't actually know what's going on with it. Like, you're told, oh, this is what we're doing, and then you find out as they're doing it, haha, that's not the plan all along. And I like don't find that very interesting. I like to see planning and all of this kind of stuff, and I think I get more of that in The Last Magician. So we actually see them planning out how this is going to go. And yeah, of course things go wrong because that's how heist books go, but they actually had a plan that, you know, it's not just, oh, the plan isn't actually going wrong, this was the plan all along. Like, no. It's, I liked seeing, okay, this is the plan, them actually doing a good bit of the plan and then realizing, oh my god, we didn't account for this, and then having to improvise. You get me? And I also just really like the time travel aspect of it as well. So for CAWPILE, I gave characters a 9, atmosphere a 9, writing a 9, plot a 10, intrigue a 10, logic an 8. I do think some of the time travel logic was like a little weird. And enjoyment, I gave a 9. I did really enjoy the characters as well. Like, I know I said that, like, oh, it's more plot, but I do enjoy the characters as well, especially Esther, because she's like in like the 21st century, and so like her going back and having to like fit in, and some of the stuff she does, like, just shocking them, and it is quite entertaining. I did take a little while to warm up to Harsh in it. Yeah, it took me a little while to warm up to him, but I did in the end really like him, and I am actually currently reading the second one, and I will say that's like completely switched. Like, in the first book I was like all for Esta, and like it took me a little while to warm up to Harsh, and like now Esta's kind of annoying me, but I'm like, yes, I love you, Harsh. And I also really enjoy the side characters as well. I think my one issue with it is that the author like killed off like 2 female characters to like further the story of other people, and I don't like, why is it always the female characters? And also one of them was like hinted to being an LGBTQ community. Okay, so then the next book I read this month was Relevals by Leigh Bardugo. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. So I have actually talked about this in ranking Leigh Bardugo's Grishaverse books. I did talk about it. So this is the final book for now in the Grishaverse. It is the continuation of King of Scars, which follows characters from both Six of Crows and also from the original Grisha trilogy. I think it has better pacing than King of Scars. King of Scars was really disjointed and just really slow right up until the end. Whereas this, I feel like it kept a pretty good pace throughout. It still had that disjointed feeling because of all the perspectives, and like I thought that was like the whole point of King of Scars, was it was going to be building up to this, and then they would all like be reunited and it would like make better sense and it would feel more connected. But that still didn't happen in here, so it still felt very disjointed. And for something that was originally called the Nikolai duology, where was Nikolai most of the time? I feel like he got the least amount of page time from anyone. There was an event around the halfway mark in here that I thought didn't really further the story at all. It was just there to add shock value. And I can't say what it is for spoiler reasons. It's kind of like what I said about The Last Magician. When you like kill someone off to further someone else's story, like at least I guess that's kind of a reason. Or if someone is killed off, like I'm trying to think of a book where this happens, but someone is killed off because they had like information that the main characters needed, or they had etc etc. It didn't really add any challenges except to like shock readers. I also felt like there was a lot of like fan service in this. It did feel like kind of like really well written fan fiction, because there was a lot of things that were just in there and then like didn't actually add much to the story, did it? Last thing I'll say on this is the ending. Again, kind of this happened with King of Scars. There was something at the very end of the book that I thought was so stupid because it just erased every single thing that happened in previous books. And then it happened again in here, and it just made me very mad. For CAWPILE, I gave characters a 7, atmosphere a 6, writing an 8, plot a 7, intrigue a 6, logic a 6, enjoyment a 7. So it was a high enough 3-star. Like, it wasn't too far off a 4, but I do feel pretty good. Like, I do feel like it is a 3-star. But then I'm going to talk about the next 2 books together, and that is Diablos Gate by N.K. Jemisin and The Stone Sky. So these are books 2 and 3 in the Broken Earth trilogy. I gave both of these 4 stars, but I feel kind of disappointed because I really enjoyed the first book, and it was like so close to being a 5-star, and I thought the second and third book, surely they'll be a 5-star to me, but I actually liked the books less and less each time. I think the reason why I liked the 5th season like so much and so close to being a 5-star was because of the perspectives in there and like the twist that kind of ties it all together. I enjoyed that. Whereas this, we're now following, so we're following Esun, and we're also following her daughter, who we don't get her perspective in the first book. And it's not like I hated these books. I guess it just wasn't the same, but like I also understand why it was that way. These are already like kind of like leaving my mind. I'm already starting to like be foggy on the details of this, whereas like the first book I can still remember so much that happens in that. This series is set in a really far future, where there are these like 5th seasons which are like life-ending events, and now like, and in these books like this really terrible one has just started, and it might go on for like thousands of years, and they're like trying to stop it. In the 5th season, it starts with Esun, whose child has been murdered and her other child taken by their father. I don't think that's a spoiler, it literally happens in like the first chapter. And Esun is trying to find her, and then we got to the Diablos Gate. Esun seems to kind of just forget about her daughter until like near the very end, and then she's like, oh yeah, I forgot about her, I need to go get her. And then like, even then, it's not until like the very close to the end of the book that they're reunited. And I'm like, literally, like, your whole goal from the first book was to be reunited with your daughter, and you haven't done it yet. I do think this was like kind of a bit of like middle book syndrome, but then like a lot of like important things happen to the story. I honestly think it should have been a duology, and a lot of the stuff that happens in these 2 books should have been combined into one. Like, I know it would have been a pretty big book, but like I feel like there was a good bit that could have been cut out of both of these that is just like traveling and all of this stuff. And I know some people like, you know, those kind of traveling stories, but I'm not super into those. So I feel like just a lot of this could have been like shoved together into one book, and it could have been a duology, and I think I would have much preferred it that way. I read the Diablos Gate, and I find I do enjoy the writing in here. Like, it's a bit difficult to get your head around at first, but once you're in it, you're in it. And I think, and that's why I picked the Stone Sky up, despite the fact it wasn't on my TBR, because I was like, I'm like 100% into the writing style right now. I'll finish this series. And I guess by the end, I was just over the writing style. I was like, this is so long-winded, just get to the point. It felt very anticlimactic because I felt like there was all this build-up. This book was just all build-up, and like the first like 2/3 of this book were also all build-up, and then there was very little resolution. For the Diablos Gate, I gave characters a 9, atmosphere an 8, writing an 8, plot an 8, intrigue a 9, logic an 8, enjoyment an 8, and so that was it. Pretty decent 4-star. For the Stone Sky, I gave characters an 8, atmosphere a 7, writing a 7, plot a 7, intrigue a 7, logic an 8, and enjoyment a 7. This one was a pretty low 4-star, but I do still think they are 4-star, and I do think it is a very interesting series, and I would recommend it, but I just, by the end, I was kind of over it a little. Okay, so now we get to talk about my favorite book of the month, and that is Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. I love this so much. I actually can't say much on this because of the fact it is the 3rd series in the Realm of the Elderlings, which is like the 7th book in the Realm of the Elderlings, and also it's a like direct continuation of the Farseer trilogy, which I love the Farseer trilogy. Please read that, and then also please read this because it's so good. I love this. I really did. I love this. I love this. I love this. I gave this a 5-star, and is that surprising to anyone? No. I do. I just love Robin Hobb anyway, and I had a feeling that this would be a 5-star. As I said, I can't really say much about this because it takes place 15 years after the original Farseer trilogy. So in the Farseer trilogy, we follow Fitz, who is the bastard son of the king-in-waiting chivalry. He is left at the keep by his maternal grandfather, who doesn't want to have to care for him anymore, and then when he like gets to Buckkeep, he finds out that his father has abdicated his position and like fled to the countryside, and so he's kind of just left there to be taken care of by the stable hand. And then eventually the king decides, hey, I'll make use of him and train him up as an assassin. And so that's what the original Farseer trilogy follows. And then we get to this, and we are reunited with all of the characters that I love so freaking much. And it's 15 years later, and it's been a pretty quiet 15 years, and then trouble is starting again. So yeah, I can't really say much like plot-wise or anything like that, except for the fact that I just loved it. I love the characters in here so much. I will say, out of all of the audiobooks, because I listen to these and read along, I just find that's the best way because there's a lot of information in these, and so I feel like that's the best way to pick up on everything. Yeah. And I will say the audiobook narrator for the first series, so for the Farseer trilogy, was my absolute favorite. Nobody else is doing it the same. I didn't mind the audiobooks, like I didn't hate them. It's just I'm like, oh, that first guy was so good. The last thing I will say, I guess, is that this is like the first time this has ever happened to me that I knew nearly straight away that this was going to be a 5-star. I've never had that feeling before. It's always not until like around the 50% mark where I'm like, okay, I'm really loving this. I literally finished chapter 1, and so chapter 2 starts on page 24, and I finished chapter 1 and I was like, this is a 5-star. I just know it. And I was right. And yeah, that has never happened to me. Page 24 out of like 580. And I knew this was a 5-star. So my CAWPILE ratings, characters were a 10. As I said, I just adore them. Atmosphere, a 9. Writing, a 10. I love her writing. Plot, a 10. Intrigue, a 9. Logic, a 9. Enjoyment, a 10. And that is a 5-star. So the next one was a reread, and that is Windwitch by Susan Dennard. I have read this before. I read them last year. Yes. And I fell in love with them last year, but this time I'm loving them even more. There are so many things that I did not pick up on the first time around that is just blowing my mind. And like the notes that I've made on this, because I'm reading this for Which Lands Along, literally make no sense because it's just me. I have like the page number written down, and it's just like, they're killing me. I love them so much. I'm like, that is not helpful. But I just love them so freaking much. When I read it first time, I gave this a 4-star. And like, it was still like a decent 4-star. Like, I thought it was solid. I really liked it. And this time, I just loved it. I fell in love with it. There's so many things that I did not pick up on the first time around that I was like, I know what's happening. I know what's happening here. And yeah, I just fell in love with it. So this series is very hard to explain because a lot happens. And I mean, by the time you get to the end of the first book, it's a completely different story. But roughly, we are following Safi, who is a truth witch, which means she can tell when someone is lying to her, but she hides this ability because she doesn't want anyone to know, because then they will use her in their political games because the 20-year truce is ending. And she has a best friend who is a thread witch called Isolde, and the two of them are trying to save up enough money to get out of the city and make a life for themselves. And this is all disrupted when they come across a blood witch who can sense your magic and also then track you across distances. And the two of them end up having to go on the run. And it is super fast paced, it is super action packed, and it is so complicated at times. And I love that. I know a lot of people don't love that, but if that sounds like something you are into, totally check this out. I will say, when I first read this, the reason why it was a 4-star was because, like, it was a 4-star in general because I liked it. Like, I liked all of the characters and all of this, but there was one plot line in here that I loved, and that was like a 5-star even last time. And I mean, I still loved it this time. I was screaming over it because I just know what's happening and I just love them. Yeah, but there was a plot line that I just absolutely loved the last time, and I was like still enjoying the other plot lines, but like there was this one plot line that I really wanted to get back to. But this time I was still obviously really invested in the plot line that I love, and because they're my favorite characters and all of that. But I did actually find myself more interested in the other plot lines as well, and I think that is probably why it's a 5-star, because it's not just this one part of that is a 5-star. Now the whole thing is a 5-star for me. We obviously get the perspectives that we had in the first book, but there's also one bonus perspective that we get in here. And I did really enjoy that because in the first book, we get told a lot of things about her. And I think when I was first reading it, I didn't really pay that much attention to her because I was like, oh, I don't like you because of what another character had said about her in the first book. We were just kind of led to believe that she's terrible, and she's really not, and I really love her. There's the other perspectives as well. There's so many things that I didn't pick up on the first time because I was like wanting to get back to that other thing. So yeah, I did. I really enjoyed this. I absolutely adore it. I love this series so much. Please read it. Characters, I gave 10. Atmosphere, I gave an 8. Writing, I gave a 9. Plot, I gave a 10. Intrigue, I gave a 10. Logic, I gave an 8. And enjoyment, I gave a 10. And again, that is a 5-star. It's slightly lower than Fool's Errand, but still a 5-star. I have one more book to talk about this month, and that is A Sky Beyond Storm by Sabatier. This is the final book in the Ember Quartet, and I gave it a 3-star. So this series I have had a rocky relationship with, because the first book was a 4-star, then the second book was a 3, then the third book was a 4, now it's a 3 again. I have liked the series in general, but I thought this finale was pretty underwhelming. Number one problem with it is I listened to these on audiobooks, and I fell in love with audiobooks. Even if I didn't enjoy the story, I really enjoyed listening to them. And they changed the voice actor for Elias. 3 books he had the same one, and then the final book, and I could not get behind that. Like, that already took me out of the story, because I literally had in my head, because at the start of the chapters it'll like say their name, and so it'll be like chapter 1 Leia, chapter 2 Elias, and I literally have in my head, like ingrained in there, what the other guy sounded like when he said Elias at the start of chapters, and it was never that voice that said it, and I was like, no. So that's just me being picky, but I really enjoyed the voice actor for the first 3 books. I actually enjoyed it, and I thought it was going to be a 4-star up until the 70% mark, because it was solid. It was a pretty good pace. Like, nothing incredibly wild was happening or anything like that, but it was interesting. It was keeping me interested, and it was building up quite nicely. And there was a couple of things that bothered me. Like, there was this whole new magic aspect that was being added in here. I'm like, you did not develop the magic enough in the first 3 books. That has been one of my main complaints the whole way along. You did not develop the magic enough, and now you're adding this whole new thing in the 4th book. I found Leia quite frustrating at times in this book. Like, she really got on my nerves sometimes. If you've read the other books and have like loved the characters and are really attached to them, I think you will be fairly satisfied with this. But for someone who I was never 100% attached, I liked them, but I never loved them. And so for me, and for like others like me who are reading this more because like they like it and like the plot is kind of interesting and they just kind of want to know what happens, I think this will probably be a letdown, because as I said, it was 4 stars up until the 70%, and then like the final climax battle happens and it was nonsense. Literal nonsense. Like, I obviously can't tell you the exact things that happened that made me so mad. Basically, by the end, literally nothing had an impact on me. Like, I mean, it's a war. People are dying and all of this, and I just do not care. In that final climax, like, you had 3 books and the start of this book to do it. And like, in the final battle, like, Sabatier decides to try and make the Commandant, like, a complicated character who has more than you know. And I'm like, oh, just stop. I found it just kind of stupid and so predictable and so anticlimactic. Yeah, I think it was just far too easy, especially for Leia and Elias. I think you could see their ending from a mile away. And you could also see Helen's as well. So characters, I gave a 6. Atmosphere, I gave a 7. Writing, I gave an 8. Plot, I gave a 6. Intrigue, I gave a 7. Logic, I gave a 5. Enjoyment, I gave a 7. As I said, it would have definitely been a 4-star if not for that final battle. Anyway, so thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!